right? And there is some component of reinforcement learning in how they decide what ads to show to you. And I guess what is the effective click-through rate that you have for ads? So how often do people click on an ad? When was the last time you clicked on a Google ad? Anyone? Have you ever clicked on a Google ad? One. Okay. From how many searches? Like a few thousand, like, or more? Tens of thousands of queries that you fire on Google? Few thousand queries, right? So the effective click-through rate on Google is something like 0.00016 or something like that, percentage of ad displays get a click on it. Okay. So rewards are very sparse in those kinds of real problems, but still we manage to learn using the same ideas. But in general, right, unless the rewards are frequent, right, the agent will not be able to learn much. And so what we are trying to optimize, I'll try to push on a little faster now. So what we are really trying to optimize is a notion of what we call a return, right? So if you know, for example, a game will only run for so long, right? I can try to accumulate as much reward as possible during the course of the game. Right? And then so I can just basically add up all the reward I'm getting, okay, and use that as my optimization. Is my volume varying too much?
No, sir.
It's fine? Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, so I could just add up everything and then use that as the criterion that I'm trying to optimize. Okay? Or if I do not know when my task is going to end, right? Or if I do not know if my task will end. Okay? Give me an example of a task that will not end. Or we don't really like it to end. We want it to continue as long as possible. Huh? Sorry? Louder, please. Heart rate. Well, that's not really under your control, is it? It is. It is. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, we are not talking about learning that. So even balancing on a cycle, right? You're not going to say, okay, let me balance on a cycle for 3 seconds and then fall down, right? I mean, so ideally you want to be state balanced indefinitely. So the balancing act itself is indefinite, but once you reach your destination, you're happy and you can get off. Right? So some cases you really are not looking for a fixed horizon until which you want to solve the problem. You want to be able to solve the problem indefinitely. I'm not saying infinitely, okay? Indefinitely. And in such cases, it might not be a sound objective function to optimize because it can grow unbounded. Right? So you're not really sure how large a reward, total reward you should plan for. Then in such cases, what you do is you do this kind of a discounted reward returns, right? So as the reward comes more and more in the future, okay, you're going to value it less and less. So the reward that you get tomorrow is more important than the reward you will likely get 10 years into the future, right? And yeah, so and this is also there's some psychological basis to doing this because the smaller the value of gamma, the more short-sighted you are in your decision making, and the larger the value of gamma, the more far-sighted you are in decision making, and that seems to, I mean, you guys know it, right? I mean, there are some people who are more short-sighted, some people who are more careful and plan for the future, and so on and so forth. So that seems to be a continuum of this discounting that humans do in problem solving. So that's also can be captured in this kind of discounted rate. Right? Yeah. So here's an example just to show you the difference between this kind of sum of rewards and the discounted returns. You can take any problem, the same problem, I can model it in two ways. Okay? So here's a very simple task that people often use for illustrating reinforcement learning. It's a cart pole task. Okay? There's a pole that is hinged to a cart. Okay? So the way I control the pole is by pushing the cart back and forth. If I push the cart like this, the pole will fall this way. If I pull it like this, the pole will fall the other way. So I basically have to jiggle the cart rapidly enough so that the pole stays balanced. Okay? Now, so whenever the pole falls down, right? So it's a failure, right? So basically, what I can say is I'll give you a reward of +1 for each step you keep the pole up. Okay? When the pole falls down, that's basically it. So now, if you have to maximize the sum of rewards that you are getting, that means you have to keep the pole up as long as possible. Okay? So another way of thinking about it is to think of it as a continuing task. So as soon as the pole falls down, I reset the pole and I ask you to keep doing this. So your job in life is nothing but just keep jiggling the cart. Whenever the pole falls down, somebody comes in, resets the pole to some position. So you keep doing this forever, right? So in such cases, what I can do is I can say I'll give you a -1 upon failure, okay, and I'll give 0 otherwise. Okay? So the return that you will get is like minus gamma power k for the k steps before the failure, okay, and then again it will get reset. Then again minus gamma power k2, which is the next time you fail, and so on and so forth. So if you want to keep it up, the longer you keep it up, the greater the exponent for the gamma, right? The more the negative value will decay. Okay, so both ways, what you will end up doing is trying to keep the pole up as long as possible. Okay, but you could use the episodic formulation or a discounted formulation. Great. Right. So yeah. So one of the things that to make so far, right? So I have not talked about anything about the dynamics of the world itself, right? So I have just even just taking real examples and so on and so forth. But when we start trying to mathematically model reinforcement learning problems, so what we do is we may start making certain strong assumptions about the dynamics of the world. Okay? So the assumption that we typically end up making is that the world is Markov. The people understand what Markoveness is. So it essentially means that so what happens at the next time step, okay, depends only on the current state. It doesn't matter how I arrived at the current state. So I could have played a different set of moves, I don't care. So at this point, this is the board position. So what happens next depends on what the current board position is. So we make this kind of a significant simplification, and therefore we can write down our dynamics as a function of only the current state and current action. So this is the next state, and that's the reward that I'm going to get. So both of these are influenced only by the current state and current action. Everything that went on before that is irrelevant. Okay. So that's basically the Markov assumption. So this allows us to model this as what's called a Markov decision process. The people who have had any OR background should find MDP is very familiar. Okay, that's something that's used quite often in operations research in looking at decision problems. And so it's Markov because the transition dynamics are Markov. It's a decision process because you have a set of decisions that you make, a sequence of decisions that you make, and you get and a reward associated with it. Right? So the two components here are the one-step dynamics that we have, and then the reward expectations. So typically reinforcement learning problems are modeled using expectations, but more and more recently, right? People are using the whole distribution on the reward itself to model it. So we'll see why that is in a couple of not a couple of slides in the later half of the talk. Right, so you can think of the MDP as the tuple SA, Psi, P, and R. S is a set of actions. A is a set of S is a set of states. A is a set of actions, and P is the probability of transition from one state to the next under a certain action. R is the reward expectation, and your goal is to learn a policy pi, okay, and you're supposed to maximize the total expected reward. So regardless, so whatever formulation you use for the quote-unquote total, it could be discounted, it could be just the total, and so on and so forth. So this is one slide summary of the RL model that we'll be using. Okay. It's a simple example. Right? So that is a frequent criticism against reinforcement learning work, that we always tend to show people grid worlds. So very nice maze-like environments that are easy to visualize and so on and so forth. But then we also end up running all our experiments on these grid worlds. Right? But of course, I will be showing you more real-world problems, but grid worlds are easy to visualize. Okay. So here we have a set of states. All these squares are your states. Your actions are north, south, east, and west, and the psi tells you which states can you take which actions. For example, if you're here, you cannot go west. Right? And the transition probabilities tell you how you move in this world. It's kind of obvious, right? And the rewards tell you what your goal is, right? So in this case, you will have a reward of +1 if you reach the state marked G, okay, and 0 everywhere else. So that's the example of a MDP. There's one crucial concept that people use in solving reinforcement learning problem. That's as a value function. So let's, without analyzing what the value function is, just remember this expression here. Okay? It is just the expectation of the future rewards that I am going to get, starting from state S, okay, and following a policy phi. I have to specify a policy phi because depending on what decisions I make, the rewards I am going to get will change. Right? So the value of a state under a policy phi is basically the expectation of the reward starting from the state S and following policy phi thereafter. Okay? And yeah, so we can actually write this very easily in a recursive form. You can see that, right? So the return is RT is written out like that's basically the definition of the discounted return. Right? And then I can write it in this form. Right? I've done nothing, but I just taken one gamma out, and then you can see that the expression inside is basically the return starting from time t plus 1. Okay? And now I plug this in to my expression here. So RT is basically RT plus 1 plus gamma capital RT plus 1. And what is the expectation of capital RT plus 1? It's basically the value of the next state. Okay? So I need to find the expectation of small RT plus 1 plus gamma times capital RT plus 1. But the expectation of capital RT plus 1 by definition is the value of the next state. So that's basically what I get here. Okay? So it's RT plus 1 plus gamma times the value of ST plus 1. Okay? And so I can basically write this now as a set of recursive equations, and this is basically a set of linear equations. And I can solve this. There are many methods for solving it. You can choose your favorite linear equation solver, and you can, for a fixed value of pi, you can find what the value function is. Okay? So this is called the Bellman equation, and the guy is Richard E. Bellman. Bellman equation. Yeah, of course, everybody has their own form of the Bellman equation. So Russians call it something else. The Russians call it the Poisson equation. Anyway. So this is the notion of the Bellman, of the value function here. So I have a policy that can go up, down, left or right with equal probability. Okay? So in that case, and I get a reward of 0 everywhere, okay? except when I go from A to A prime and B to B prime, which I get a large positive reward, and everywhere else I get 0, except when I run into a wall, where I get a -1. Basically, you can solve this. This gives you the value function. That essentially says that if you start at this state, okay, and then act randomly forever, okay, the total reward that you are going to get is 3. And if you start at this state and act randomly, the total you are going to get is -2. So now you can see what we are going to do. Why do we need this kind of value function? Right? We'll come to that in a minute. So for finite MDPs, so what I mean by finite MDPs, these are MDPs which have a finite set of states and a finite set of actions. Okay? And we're also talking about MDPs where the time steps are discrete. I'm not talking about continuous time. I'm talking about time will go in ticks of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Not real time. So in such cases, what we can show is, I'm not going to go into that, is that the policies can always be partially ordered. So I can take any two policies, and I can say that if V pi of S is greater than or equal to V pi prime of S for all S, then pi is greater than pi prime. Okay? And I can show that there exists some V pi, okay, which dominates all possible value functions that I can define on the MDP. So that's basically what I call an optimal value function. So this is the value function that corresponds to the best possible choice of actions that I can make in every state. So it's a fairly intuitive arguments, but I'm not going to try and attempt it here because we have 5 minutes. I need to finish my first part and move on to my second part, which is mathematically more taxing. Right? So what's the notion of an optimal policy? An optimal policy is something like this that takes you to the goal. Right? But then that's also an optimal policy. So are these, right? So I could have multiple optimal policies in the world. Okay? So that makes finding optimal policies a little tricky. Okay? But if you think about it, all of these optimal policies will assign the same value to the states. Right? So what is the value to the state here? It's basically gamma power the number of steps I need to go to the goal from that state, right? So it doesn't matter which policy I am following. Let's say I take this policy, start from here. Okay, I'll take 5 steps to reach the goal. Right? Doesn't matter which optimal policy I am following. Okay, it will always be 5 steps to reach the goal. Okay, so the value for that state will be gamma power 5. Right? So regardless of what optimal policy I end up finding, it will always have the same optimal value function. So that is one of the reasons why early reinforcement learning literature, you'll find a lot of approaches which try to find the optimal value function and not try to find the optimal policy. So once you have the optimal value function, how do you recover the optimal policy? So I will skip this. Okay. So once you have the optimal value function, how do you recover the optimal policy? You just be greedy with respect to this optimal value function. So I just do a one step look ahead. Okay, if I take this action, okay, what are the states I will end up in? And then if I take action 2, what are the states I will end up in, and so on and so forth. And then basically I figure out which of those actions will give me the highest value in terms of the state I end up in, and I take those actions. Just one step look ahead. I don't have to know about what will happen in the future after that. This allows me to be greedy with respect to this value function, and we all know that greedy is usually not a good solution technique, right? But in this case, being greedy with respect to the optimal value function yields the optimal policy. So this is the neat thing about learning the optimal value. And yeah, so this is going back to the same grid world, and this is showing you all possible optimal policies here, and all of them have a single value function, optimal value function. Any questions? So the crucial question is, how do you find these optimal value functions? Right. So there are many ways of doing it, but the simplest way is to do something called value iteration, okay? Where you set up a recursive equation like this. You make a guess for what your optimal value function is, plug it into the right hand side, do the computation, find out a new guess for the value function. You repeat this until you converge. So how do you guarantee that it will converge? Yes, it will converge. People who know a little bit about analysis can see that because of the gamma here, which is less than 1, right? And also the fact that P is a stochastic matrix. Okay, this iterations will ensure that you converge. And you can show that formally. If you're interested, I can give you pointers offline. But so this is one very simple way of solving it. But then there are many ways to solve it. And a large class of algorithms fall under the general dynamic programming setup. If you're familiar with dynamic programming, I suppose, right? It falls under a large class of algorithms fall under dynamic programming setup. But the problem with dynamic programming is that it requires a complete knowledge of the system dynamics. You need to know the T, you need to know the R and everything, and only then you can solve it using dynamic programming. And it's expensive, not practical, but cool thing is that it guarantees that things will converge. But then reinforcement learning methods are essentially online approximate dynamic programming methods. You require no knowledge of the transition dynamics. You essentially end up sampling trajectories through the state space. But convergence is not always guaranteed. So in some sense, if you think about it, what dynamic programming will do is take a state and take an expectation of the next step. You remember what we were doing in the value iteration thing I showed you. This is basically a Bellman equation. Okay? You take a guess for V, plug it into the right hand side, solve it, and then you find a new guess. Right? But then basically you're looking through the entire tree and then figuring out what to do. This is why I said it could become expensive, because you need to look at all the things that are happening. But in the simplest reinforcement learning method, so what you do is, instead of doing the full computation on the whole on the tree, right, you just take one path through that. Right? So this is like a game tree if you want, right? So this is the state, these are the possible actions I could do at the state, and these are the possible outcomes after doing an action. Right? So what I do is I do one action in a state, and I look at one possible outcome, and then I take this transition that I see here, and then I use that for updating my value function. So if you think about it, so this is my expectations, RT plus 1 plus VST. That is what I should be learning. Right? I'm using RT plus 1 plus VST plus 1 as my guess for VST, and then I'm updating my current estimate for VST. This is very simple averaging method, right? So if you and it surprisingly enough works very well. This is simplest TD method. This is called temporal difference, because you're looking at the value at ST plus 1 and value at ST. You're taking the difference of the values over time. So it's called the temporal difference method. Right? And the cool thing with it doesn't require a model of the environment. It requires only experience. If you remember in the very beginning, I said that interaction is very important in reinforcement learning. All it needs is this way of generating this interaction. Right? And TD methods can be fully incremental. You don't actually have to know the final outcome. As long as you have a guess for what the value of the next state is, okay, you can start learning. Right? And in implementation wise, it requires less memory, less peak computation. You don't have all the states coming at you at the same time where you have to update it, so on and so forth. And there are a variety of these. I'm not going to go into the details. So there are, what I showed you is called TD0. That simple update that I showed you is called the TD0 method. Then there's a parameter lambda, which we assign 0 there, but we could have look ahead into the future. There's TD lambda, and then there are variety of methods, and there is a whole class of problems which I didn't talk about, class of algorithms which I didn't talk about today, which are based on directly looking at policies, not looking at value functions, but directly looking at only policy. These are called policy search methods, and there are several such approaches there. And of course, there are modifications of dynamic programming itself, which are more online. Okay, so which people have also developed for solving these problems. So, variety of places in which RL has been applied, right? And yeah, I knew that I would run out of time, so I have a couple of videos and other things I can show people later. Or you can go to, how many of you heard of Andrew Ng? Okay, he's Andrew Ng. Okay, go to Andrew's homepage, right? And look for helicopter videos. There are lots of cool videos of reinforcement learning agent flying helicopters. Okay, so these are all trained using reinforcement learning. That's really cool, cool application. So it's the de facto learning algorithm for training robots, right? So for when you want to have any kind of learning that's happening with robotic systems, people use reinforcement learning a lot. And people have even looked at control of chemical plants using reinforcement learning. So what is optimal rate at which you should be mixing certain chemicals in, so that the consistency of the output is maintained. And the chemical plant itself is very difficult to model, and there are lots of extraneous factors that change the performance of the system. So it's very hard to do the modeling, but they can monitor the quality of the output that is coming in, and even if there's a small variation in the quality, they can use them as a reward signal. And people have looked at various combinatorial optimization problems solving them using reinforcement learning. So elevator dispatching. So if you have go to a large building, huge banks of elevators, like 10 elevators that keep going up and down. So how do you schedule them cleverly? So people have looked at solving that. VLSI placement and routing, job shop scheduling, and various routing algorithms, network routing algorithms. There are several variants around use ideas from reinforcement learning. And there is call attrition control. So, you're trying to place a call. Like you're a mobile company which is getting a lot of people who are trying to place calls. You have to decide which calls you are going to permit, which calls you are going to drop. Right? So people have actually modeled that using reinforcement learning and tried to solve that. And people have built intelligent tutoring systems. Our group has done some work on building tutoring systems using R. The idea here is that the teacher learns how to teach the student. Okay? The students would have certain idiosyncrasies. Okay, they might find some topics hard, some topics easy, and so on and so forth. But the teacher learns how to teach the student by interacting with the student. So students should find this interesting because in this model, the teacher gets punished if the student fails an exam. So that's how learning should be, right? Anyway, so that's how you model a tutoring system using RL, and then it's a primary mechanism of biological learning that people use for looking at how various parts of the brain learn different concepts and so on and so forth. And people use it a lot in psychology, in OR, and of course in game playing. Right? But then, here is my one slide on connecting this to text. Okay, so there has been a lot of work. And if you can see, many of the papers are pretty recent, right? So which are connecting reinforcement learning ideas to text or text-related applications, right? So I'll talk about recommendation systems. People have looked at news stories, looked at computational advertising, right? Look at recommending comments. So you go to a news article. So what are the comments that you would want to see on the news article? You know, when people just mostly garbage, right? Comments are mostly garbage. So you have some systems by which you can try to rate the comments and use that to kind of push comments up and down. But then that has a significant problem of first mover advantage. You know, somebody posts the first comment, and lots of people like it, and then somebody comes in with a very insightful comment later on. Right? But if you're blindly going by the number of likes, right, the guys who came first will always trump. Right? And of course, you don't go beyond the first 10 comments, right? Do you? Or 3 comments? I don't know. How many of you go and rate comments? 3, 4. Okay, thank you. I personally have never rated a comment. I mean, but yeah. So that is the big problem that we have. See, this small audience, mostly tech-savvy people. There are 3 people who rate comments, right? So the feedback that you get on comments is also very noisy. Very few people rate comments, right? So how do you set up a learning system that allows you to rank them better? So same thing with news stories and advertising and so on and so forth. So this is something which I'll talk about on the second half of the talk. The other 2 application cases I will not talk about. So one is dialogue systems. So the first set of papers, right, was an interesting experiment where they built a dialogue agent that will exist in a multi-user domain. So it's like a role-playing environment. It's a virtual environment where different people create avatars, and then they go there, and the avatars interact with one another, and so on and so forth. Right? So they actually dropped in an artificial agent. Okay? And it was supposed to strike up conversations with people in that environment, okay? And then convince them that they are talking to another player, okay? not to an artificial agent. So they did a series of studies on this, and it learned with interacting with people. So there are some people who are told beforehand that this is an artificial agent, and they were supposed to give it feedback. So that is where it was getting its evaluation from. They are not telling it how to talk. They say, no, that doesn't sound realistic. Or whenever they get found out by another person that they are not a real human, okay, that acted as a negative signal to them. Okay, so based on all of these, okay, they went ahead and kept training the agent. And you can see that the study was not a short one, it ran or anything, but it was in the sense that it could be also a commentary on how simple dialogue is on these kinds of online learning agent could learn it very easily. But still, it was very interesting. Then this is other experiment that happened in Europe where they looked at learning agents that learned how to interact with people who are coming to a tourist center. So they were coming to this tourist center and asking people for directions. Okay? So hey, how do I go to Paris from here, or how do I go to X? What's the best time to visit this museum, and so on and so forth. The people are coming to this tourist center and asking different kinds of queries. So the queries themselves are somewhat limited. They couldn't ask about everything under the sun. But then people were not always good at expressing things, you know. So the problem that they looked at was, okay, when have I gathered enough information about the person's needs that I can now try to answer? And somebody comes, say, in Belgium and asks somebody, "Hi, I'm going to Paris," right? You should probably be suggesting a train to them, right? As opposed to somebody who's in a hotel and then asking somebody to this place in Paris or something, and then you very basically have to suggest just maybe taking a cab or something. So the responses that you give, right? So it should depend on the context in which the query is, and people might not always be very clear in specifying the context. This is something which we saw in different avatars throughout the day, right? So when people are talking about query, at least in Showman's talk, the actual information need is not communicated properly. So that happens also when we have real dialogue systems. So the reinforcement learning agent here learned how many queries, how many questions do you ask the person before you attempt an answer. And it actually was fairly successful, and they have a functioning system out there now, which actually tries to answer user queries. And they are also trying to extend the same thing to answering when you call in for telephone conversations or complaints and things like that. Basically, trying to automate the call center responses and so on. There's another place where significant amount of and text was involved, right? And text understanding and things like that. And also, this goes back to some old work on focus crawling by Andrew Miller, where they looked at using reinforcement learning to choose. So, given a set of seed URLs which you are supposed to crawl, okay, so which are the ones that I should be crawling first? And they used a set of features extracted from the web page